This is 40K Today, voted the #1 Warhammer 40K 15-minute magazine-style international podcast on all of Cadia Prime. You know, before the fall.
Okay, folks, how you doing? Welcome to 40K Today. This is your daily slice of delicious, gluten-free, dairy-free, meat-free 40K news and views. There are traces of nut, though, or nuttiness. So if you're allergic to that, there's nothing I can do to help. I'm sorry. We feature stories from all across the hobby and all over the world. In fact, do you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is the most international 40K podcast anywhere. Today, we go as far afield as Chicago. I'm your host, Steve Joel, and today on the program, hey, how are Eldar looking in ninth? Kurt Klass is a member of the US WTC Team, and he stops in to help us with ways to play the elves in new 40K. And next up, we're going to speak to one of the folks behind a podcast which started with the intent to bring people together and make them better 40K players. Isn't that a great reason to be, don't you think? So there I was flicking around for a new 40K podcast to listen to when I see that the three men behind Tabletop Titans are guests on a show called Grim Dark Filthy Casuals. Well, if it's good enough for Adrian, Brian and Bridger, I say to myself, then it's good enough for me. So I give it a listen. And what I find is four guys who just enjoy the game of 40K and who started out with a great and genuine idea. Brian Tabata is one of the folks who puts the podcast together, and we caught up to talk about how it came to be. Brian from Grim Dark Filthy Casuals. That's such a great name for a podcast, Brian, by the way. welcome to 40K Today. So, how did your show get that name? Where does that come from?
It's a tough name to, I think, describe to someone who's not familiar with the 40K universe.
Yeah.
But yeah, being heavily influenced by, of course, Warhammer 40,000, the grim dark future. That's where that sort of first part of the name kind of comes from. But really, the founding members and as a group, we really sort of see ourselves as we like to be competitive players, but we also enjoy the other aspects of the game as well. We're into the hobby. We're into the narrative, and we're into the lore. We enjoy so many different facets and aspects of the game that we sort of are these like filthy casuals where we'll try hard on the weekends, but at the same time, we're enjoying the casual aspect of it too.
I really like that description because I think a lot of us, and I'm exactly the same. I like to think of myself as a competitive player. I'm just not a very good one. And then, I also love all of I think this is the appeal of the hobby is that I get to do kit bashing and painting and playing and collecting is a big part of it. And then the community aspect too. So I really like that idea of calling all of us who fit into that category filthy casuals. I got into your podcast via your most recent one with the guys from Tabletop Titans, who we're familiar with. Mm-hmm. But I'm really enjoying it, man. I have to say it's a good collection of Brians and then a couple of other people involved. How did you guys get started? How did you decide that doing a podcast would be a good thing to do?
Really, because at our core, our mission is really just to make people better at all levels of the game. Because, again, being a competitive player is not mutually exclusive with the other aspects of the hobby. So we were really just a group of players in Chicago and, talk to each other. We're all sort of like, all of us seem like pretty normal people, have pretty normal jobs, and you're trying to balance family, work, and this hobby that we all love. And we sort of had this common goal of like, we just want to sort of elevate everyone's play and really try and bring the, at first just the Chicago community together. We were meeting a bit last year, but we really started up the website in December, and then we, just started kind of like building it from there. Got a lot of sort of positive reception, and we were trying to basically find ways again to get content out. And we said, normally we'd have these big long discussions, coming up with ideas and writing articles and videos and stuff. Like, why don't we just start recording these ideas so we can get them out faster, get them out more relevant? And we just started putting out our thoughts, and people seem to be responding to them pretty well.
Yeah, well, it's a nice combination of different guys you've got involved with coming at it from different armies, different points of view. And I really want to encourage people to have a listen because there is so much out there. There are a lot of podcasts. Have you gone into this with the intention that it will be a big, successful, high numbers, money spinning deal, or is it just, hey, we'll see what happens, and if people listen and like it, that's great?
Yeah, I think we sort of had a little confidence in what we thought we had value in what we were saying. And we're just, hoping that people could find that value and sort of listen to it and kind of follow it. Because again, the main goal is we just want to put resources out there for people to be better players. Really, that's the focus.
Yeah. How did you get into 40K in the first place?
Oh, so in my small little gaming group of friends when I was little, I was probably middle school, sometime in the 90s, sometime there. And my friend brought me over. He's like, "Hey, I got this cool new strategy game that you got to check out," which, seemed to happen every other week. And I remember he had these like little miniatures, and he showed me this like collection of Eldar, and just this idea of sort of placing these models on the table. I had played with like, plastic army men and stuff like that before, but having a sort of like in-depth structure with all these different rules, and I think the visceral feeling of like picking up a handful of dice and rolling it really just sort of hooked me and sold me. And I've been off and on really since third edition, and really back at it in 8th and getting really into the competitive side. I mean, being older and having disposable income definitely helps.
Yeah.
And being able to field a full army and stuff like that. But yeah, and I think really as I've gotten older, even like the other aspects of the game, like I've gotten really into the hobby. Like I love the painting. I find it very sort of therapeutic and meditative for me. So
it's a big deal, right? The painting, particularly at the moment, what with everything going on. If you were a person who just enjoyed playing but hated painting, you're probably at a bit of a loss right now. Whereas if you can enjoy the kit bashing and the modeling and the painting and the collecting and the lore, the reading is another part of it that people are probably discovering more and more at the moment. I don't know if that's something that appeals to you.
The lore in 40K is probably one of the best untapped sci-fi stories that are out there that have not hit mainstream media, which, seeing the trends, like, oh, that's probably going to change in the next few years. But there's so much to it. There's so much richness, so much depth there. There's something there for everyone.
Yeah, there really is. There are some great authors. There are some great 40K authors, and then there are some great authors who, they're great authors in their own right who just happen to be doing 40K material, which is fantastic for all of us. Hey, listen, I feel like I really want to get more in depth about the game with you, but what I'd encourage people to do is listen to the podcast, Grimdark Filthy Casuals, because particularly in this latest episode, but in others as well, you really do get into the depths of it, and you're helpful to people as a person who is, wanting to get better at the game, particularly in 9th, now that that's dropped. I have found over a couple of episodes that you've given me a lot of stuff where I can go, okay, that is practical advice that I can now go away and use and try. So, which is what we're all looking for when we're listening to podcasts, in whatever topic, something that we can take away and go, okay, I can use that in a practical sense. So thank you for doing what you're doing. We appreciate it. We encourage people to give it a try. Grimdark Filthy Casuals. Brian, thanks again for your time.
Oh, no, thank you very much. And everyone at GTC will be ecstatic to hear that you and other people, I guess, are finding some practical value out there.
That's Brian Tabata from Grimdark Filthy Casuals. Check him out, really. It's a very cool, very good podcast. The link is in our show notes. Next up, our Eldar OK in 9th. We bring in a member of the USA WCT team who, did I say that right? WTC team. Yeah, I got that. Who knows his fire prisms from his wave serpents. That's next.
Today's episode of 40K Today is brought to you by Frontline Gaming. Frontline Gaming is a one-stop shop for all your Warhammer hobby needs, discounted products, American-made gaming mats and terrain, and a full line of miniatures painting service and daily hobby content. And this can all be found at frontlinegaming.org.
Welcome back. Craft World Eldar have had their ups and downs in 8th edition 40K, it's fair to say. So, where do they sit in 9th? Opinion is kind of divided if you listen around and look around the interwebs. If you play the faction and you want to know where to start for 9th or which way to go, how about some advice from a player who's had some real success? John Damaris sat down with Kurt Klass to talk War Walkers, Wraith Lords, and Wave Serpents.
All right, everyone. We're very lucky to be joined by the one and only Kurt Klass, who is a WTC Team USA member playing the pointy ears, playing the Eldar. And he stopped by to give us, in our faction focus this week, some tips and tricks for playing Eldar competitively in 9th edition. Hey, Kurt, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on, John. I really appreciate it.
All right, cool. So what would you say are some units that people should look at that you think are pretty competitive in 9th edition?
Sure. So the units I've enjoyed and had success with, I'd say Night Spinners are underrated right now. I know Eldar haven't been getting too much press, but the fact that Night Spinners, I know they went up, but they're still efficient at killing the 2-wound Marines, which are plaguing the game right now in one way or another. There are a lot of Indominus units, which are also popular at 3 wounds a pop, but it's still okay. You're a 2-wound thing. You only need 2 through. So I think Night Spinners in a custom faction with Ignore Cover and Masterful Shots and Expert Crafters are a very effective unit. I also think Shining Spears are very decent for their points if used correctly. Those are 2 of my favorite units in Eldar so far.
Very cool. So would you say that you're playing a style that is built to capitalize on your opponent's mistakes?
Yeah, I think Eldar have to at this point. There are certain armies like Death Guard, certain armies like AdMech, where you don't necessarily have to capitalize on their mistakes, whereas Death Guard can rely on durability, AdMech can rely on shooting, Marines can rely on efficiency. Eldar have to rely on mobility and outplaying their opponent, or just looking for positions that you wouldn't normally have in a normal army. You have double movement with Quicken, and you have high damage potential with a lot of Eldar units, but very low durability. So you're really looking for mistakes and exploiting them to win the game. That's the way you have. I think you have to play Eldar. At least in my experience. There are other Eldar players out there who are using more consistent stuff like Wraith Lords, Vipers, Warwalkers, maybe even Wave Serpents. I'm not going to delve into the Dark Eldar yet, but they're very different. And I find that straight Eldar, you really want to use your outplay ability and your maneuverability to capitalize on people's movements and the lack of knowledge they may have over your real mobility you have from spears.
All right, and that leads me to a question. So with the new GT mission pack, it really, really favors a lot of OBSEC. It favors durability, being able to stand on objectives. These are both things that I would say Eldar really struggles with. So how do you address the GT missions with Eldar?
Sure. So I've addressed it by preventing my opponent from playing the mission effectively. I know you can build your list to be more durable. I tried Wave Serpents, the Dire Avengers. I tried Wraith Lords. I was even debating trying Guardian Blobs, but then that fell apart real fast. So I've decided that my list is going to prevent you from playing the mission well in the way you want to. So to me, it's prevention of your opponent instead of proactive holding objectives, because there are very few straight Asuryani units which can hold the objectives and want to hold the objectives. You could argue Wave Serpents and Wraith Lords want to do it, but I find that those don't help me in the overall mission of winning the game. And they're too expensive to just be a throwaway unit. I think Harlequins do a better job at this, but for pure Asuryani, I think you have to prevent your opponent from doing the mission effectively as opposed to crushing the primary. You just want to go even.
Yeah, so you're not you're playing a game. You're just if I could describe it in a quick sentence, it's like you're saying to your opponent, look, neither one of us is going to score 45 on primary. I'm going to get us down in the 30s and the 25s, but I'm hoping to outscore you like 30 to 25 and kind of get an advantage on primary, because it doesn't really matter what you score. All it matters is that your score is higher than your opponent's score. Is that kind of how you look at it?
Exactly. I'm not winning a battle point tournament with this Eldar, to be honest, unless I don't know, I magically hold objectives, but that's not happening anytime soon. So I think you've summarized it quite accurately, that I'm playing to keep the scores low, specifically my opponents, while taking 2 or 3 or 4 for 1 trades with my Eldar units to get an advantage later in the game and be at a point where they can't score their primaries and can't score their secondaries.
Okay, last question. If somebody's sitting down across from an Eldar player, like what's a tip you would give them to keep them competitive in the game against the Eldar?
I would advise pre-measuring. I would really advise pre-measuring in a lot of circumstances, because I know most people know the distances of the most imperial weapons. You might not know every movement range and know that you can advance and charge with certain Eldar units. I know mine cannot, but certain Asuryani, certain Eldari units have very high threat ranges and irregular threat ranges than you'd normally play. So I would ask the question to your opponent, which units can move into or advance and charge? Which units can double move? Are there stratagems to get extra movement? Are there stratagems to cover certain areas of distance that you couldn't previously? So I'd advise pre-measuring after determining the threat range of every unit, and knowing which ones have fly obviously is very important. So I'd advise knowing threat ranges is very, very important, specifically for the Psychers, because of the fact that Doom and Jinx can combo together and be very potent. So I'd say becoming educated on their ranges and the stratagems and combinations of units is important, because none of the units straight up are that good. They're only unlocked by using powers, using stratagems, and using other abilities to get them to become very good.
Okay. Sounds like the more you know, the better it is. Thanks, Kurt. We really appreciate it. And if you guys want to hear more about Kurt's style of Eldar, he's going to be on Art of War next Monday.
That's Kurt Klass, member of the US WTC team and Eldar Guru. Okay, who's ready to get a song stuck in your head? It's time for the Model of the Day.
It's the model of the day, the model of the day, the model of the day.
Sloan Doherty from Sloan Ranger Studios is painting up a storm at the moment. He's got lots of great tutorial vids, my favourite being the one on how to paint Ragnar's furry cloak. But he's done such great work on a particular model, I wanted to highlight this. My favourite model that he's painted lately is an Imperial Fists Captain in Gravis armour. It's such a stunning example of the craft. Strong yellows shaded with subtle fades into a rich red, and a smooth, perfect black cape with highlights on it. Those all set the model up. But what really kicks it into next gear is the battle damage. Man, this is good. And the lightning effect on the power sword. It's such a great piece of work. It has movement and power, and I wish I could paint like that. So that's today's model of the day. Links to Sloan's work and Sloan Ranger Studios in our show notes. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining us. Big thank you again to our content producer, Alex Painter, our social media ace, Tanya Gates, and our technical producer, Seamus Ronan, for all of their hard work, and it is hard work, doing the show every single day for you. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, for Paul and John and the rest of the 40K Today team, I'm Steve John, and that's what's happening in 40K Today.